Thank you. Welcome. Welcome, everyone. Welcome. Welcome, transfer students, visiting international students, Eli Whitney students, and welcome first-year students. So happy to see you all after a fantastic move-in weekend. You all brought the best weather in many years, so I think you're off to a great start to your 4 years. Did you enjoy Bulldog Bash? We should do it again next year? Okay, good. Okay, thanks. Yeah, and really hope you're all getting settled and excited for the year ahead. Classes start tomorrow morning, and one thing you're going to find out about classes around here is that you have some time to pick what you're going to take. We have this shopping period, and to try out the courses you want to take first. And of course, that's what I hope you'll do. It's a really exciting time, a little hectic, but a lot of it's about juggling a lot of the options and choices, great choices that you have as you make up your minds. But before any of that happens, this afternoon, we're going to have this opportunity to think in the broadest sense about the intellectual community that you're joining, and to start thinking about your own intellectual life here at Yale. Some of you may have planned out every semester for your entire 4 years ahead, down to every class you will take. While some of you are just the opposite, not knowing even where to start, and of course that's all good. And many of you are probably somewhere in between with a general idea of what your next move will be, but with an openness to new ideas. So whatever you have in mind, I hope this afternoon that you'll get a sense of the world of ideas that's awaiting you. And there's also some practical business today that we'll attend to later on, which is learning how to sing Bright College Years. And so with help from the Glee Club, which is with us here today, you'll get a chance to practice. And then by the time you leave this place, you'll be able to take your place besides Yale students and alumni who know this song inside and out. And you have the lyrics with you and as part of your program. And we'll come back to this after our speech. So it's now my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker, Sarah Demers, the Horace D. Taft Associate Professor of Physics. Professor Demers is an award-winning, distinguished member of the Yale faculty and an excellent example of the intellectual possibilities ahead of you. After receiving her AB from Harvard University, Professor Demers attended the University of Rochester. Harvard is a good school. And so is the University of Rochester, where she was awarded her MA and PhD in physics. After teaching at Roberts Wesleyan College and serving as a research associate at Stanford's Linear Accelerator Center, Professor Demers joined the Yale faculty in 2009 as assistant professor of physics. And in the spring 2020, she will be teaching a course, did I say sing? She'll be teaching a course titled The Physics of Music. Professor Demers researches physics beyond the standard model at CERN's Large Hadron Collider and is currently studying Higgs boson and Z boson decays. She also works on the trigger experiment for the study. In addition, she leads the Demers group at Yale, co-leads the Atlas Upgrade Physics Group, becomes the elected chair of the US Atlas Institute Board in January, and is a member of the Mu2E collaboration at Fermilab. Professor Demers is the co-founder of the Yale Franke and Whitney Humanities Center Group Interdisciplinary Arts and Science Research, with Associate Professor of Theater Studies and Director of the Dance Studies curriculum, Emily Coates. She also collaborates with Professor Coates on a project that bridges physics and dance, and they co-teach a course called The Physics of Dance, and co-wrote a book called Physics and Dance. So as you think, so really cool, isn't she? So as you think about the journeys you're about to start tomorrow, you cannot have a better guide than Professor Demers. Please join me in welcoming her.
Thank you, Dean Chun, and welcome to each and every one of you. I am really grateful for the chance to pause with you this afternoon before starting in with the academic year that stretches out in front of us. I'm only one of many people at Yale who cares about you. We're excited about what you bring to this institution. We're in anticipation of what we'll learn from you, and we have the highest expectations for what you will gain while you're here and what you'll take away. But no pressure. You're here on purpose. You just have to do your best. So, what's your plan? How are you going to navigate the resources that surround you? I've been here for about a decade and 2 months, and I'm still coming to terms with what we have access to. Research tools, galleries, studios, machine shops, libraries. It's overwhelming. Say about the experts who populate this space. In our time this afternoon, I have 2 themes that I want to explore with you, and I'll end with a suggestion. The 2 themes are balance and, obviously, napkins. The suggestion has to do with your questions. And before I get started, I just want to note I'm speaking to you today as a member of this community, as a faculty member, as a physicist. I'm not a dean, I'm not a medical doctor, I'm not currently your professor, and I'm one perspective of many, so you should keep that in mind. So how are you going to choose from our thousands of courses? Balance is a reasonable goal. How will you balance your coursework with the hundreds of extracurricular activities I'm sure you have already signed up for? How are you going to balance sustaining your connections from home while building your networks here? How are you going to balance pursuing what you know you love with discovering what you could love? And this is related, but it's a little different. How are you going to balance doubling down on what you're good at with training yourself in new ways and becoming an expert in something new? How are you going to balance your inward focus on your education and your college time with an outward focus on our community in New Haven and beyond? Will you be truly advanced, above average, and actually get enough sleep? Consider it. You're worth it. As you do your calculations and make your decisions, balance seems like a reasonable guiding principle, and it's come more and more into fashion. Work-life balance. That idea has resulted in important societal changes, positive changes. I've spent a lot of time thinking about balance in a lot of different contexts, and you know what? I actually think that it can miss the point. And before I defend that statement, let me introduce some physics. You didn't think you were going to get away without some physics. Okay, so what are the conditions for balance? How does a physical system stay balanced? The center of mass has to be over an area of support. If your center of mass comes out away from your area of support, you start to fall. So what is an area of support? Well, you take the contact that you're making with the ground. In my case right now, it's my 2 feet. And then it includes that area of contact with the area that spans it, meaning the rectangle between my 2 feet, okay? So the wider my stance, the bigger my area of support. As I go down to 1 foot, which you can't see, but I promise I'm doing briefly, my area of support is very constrained. If I go up on my toes, I have very little room for my center of mass to wiggle before I start to fall. And let's stick to a concrete physical system here for a while. My challenge with balance as a goal. You can be balanced under a tremendous load. And you also can be balancing and exhausted. That's why when people ask me, as they frequently do, about my work-life balance, I tell them no. I hear that question and I imagine walking on a tightrope with my work in one outstretched arm and my life in the other, whatever that means. And I imagine if I'm going to add a little more work, I have to add a little more life. And the next thing you know, you find yourself at 3 o'clock in the morning making cookies for your kids' classrooms because you agreed to serve on a committee for Dean Chun. It is the way of madness, that balance. I love those committees, I do. But my goal is not to balance, as positive and important as balance can be. My goal is to thrive. And that's what I hope for you here at Yale. So how do we thrive? We have to know who we are and who we want to become. We have to know who we love, who loves us. We have to understand what sustains us and what drains us. I want to be centered, and I think that's the point. And if it means that I spend some time balanced, then fantastic. When I'm centered, I don't have to remain in my basketball defensive stance that I learned. I actually can go up on point when I have to. And I can move my center of mass out in front of my source of support. You know what that is? When you move your center of mass out in front of your source of support? It's called walking. You fall and catch yourself, right? That's what moving is. It's falling and catching. When you're centered, you can do that, and I recommend that over balanced. And I suggest thriving over reacting. I have one last comment on that topic before we move on to napkins, which I know you're waiting for. If you want to be centered, you actually have to know what your center is. You need time to reflect. And the most common mistake we can make in this context is giving short shrift to thinking and to sleeping. And you know what that means. That means that you have to turn off your phone and reflect. So now for napkins. I grew up kindergarten through 8th grade in a small town in Vermont, Groton, Vermont, a town of about 600. My father is a United Methodist pastor. He originally trained as a pianist. And my mother studied art history and education, and I'm convinced that the only job my mother can't do is the one that she explicitly trained for. She lasted about a day in a middle school teaching art before she decided no. But she's been a milk tester for dairy farms. She's worked in a nursing home, done hospice care, run a chamber of commerce, been a telemarketer, run a shelter for victims of domestic violence, run a homeless shelter, etc. If there's a complicated job that doesn't involve getting 25 students to simultaneously paint, call my mother. I didn't grow up in a wealthy or a formal household, and the goal that I was raised with was not to do well in the world, but to do good. As I was entering high school, we moved to the booming metropolis of Morrisville, Vermont, over 1,000 people, and we had our own movie theater. One screen, but our own theater. There were AP classes in my school, advanced placement classes, for college credit. And the person who taught my AP calculus class was my AP English teacher. And we started calculus with the quote of the day. And I'll never forget that quote of the day discussion stretching into half of the course period and getting to the AP test and not recognizing those curly S things that some of you may know as integrals. And if you don't know that, come talk to me. I'd love to talk to you about calculus. So that didn't go necessarily well. I was an extremely ambitious kid, so I really had run out of classes by the end of my junior year. And as has already been confessed, I was not as enlightened as all of you. At that point, I applied to Harvard. Can get that out if you have to. It was a year early from a small school that nobody had heard of. I knew that they were need blind, so my family could afford it. And I had multiple alumni interviews. In an incredible twist of fate, my final alumni interviewer, her children had been my dad's students when he was a music teacher before going to seminary. She was compassionate and connected, and she knew that I wasn't getting into Harvard from a school that no one had heard of a year early with marginal accomplishments. She asked me if I'd ever considered private school, and I told her it wasn't an option because we couldn't afford it. But she knew about scholarship opportunities, and she set me up with an interview at Phillips Academy in Andover, and I ended up doing my senior year there. There's one experience in particular that has stuck with me from Andover. I can't remember why, but I didn't go home for Thanksgiving. So I was invited to the head of school's house for Thanksgiving. And I remember the room, walking in, and the dark wood paneling everywhere, but mostly I remember the place settings. I don't know how you feel about place settings. I was trained on place settings. It was one of my jobs. Plate in the center, fork on the left, knife and spoon on the right, napkin folded under the fork. Okay? That's how we did it when I was growing up. This place setting had multiple knives, multiple spoons, multiple forks. It had things to the left of the plate, to the right of the plate, and then the indignity of it stretching on top of the plate, moving away from me. Most alarming from my perspective was the construction on top of my plate. It was a 3D conglomeration that I recognized as my napkin, exactly where the food is supposed to go. I knew I had to be on point. There were rules. Nobody was talking about them, and I was going to have to pay attention. I looked up just to see that every napkin was gone except my own. All napkins missing. And it was one of those moments where you realize something here is not like the other. It probably only took me a fraction of a second to see those napkins on people's laps. I remember thinking, I do not understand what is the purpose? What is the utility of the napkin on the lap? Since then, it's saved me many times from spills. But at the time, I thought that was a little bit ridiculous, but I was going with the flow. My napkin went on my lap. This idea that there are rules, and it's obvious that there are rules, but no one is talking about them, and you don't know what they are, I call those things napkin moments. And I've had many of them. After Andover, I was accepted to Harvard. I didn't have a lot of time to figure out a summer job between high school and going back before college. So I took on 2 positions. I was a maid at a resort in Stowe, and I was maintaining tennis courts, which required spreading a lot of chemicals. And it's likely that exposure to chemicals in one of those 2 contexts landed me with an autoimmune disease. So the week that I was supposed to be at Harvard for orientation, I was having surgery, and I had to miss the year. You're well placed to think about this. At Harvard in those days, and maybe it's true, I don't know if it's true here, if you miss orientation, you miss the year. They say, come back in a year. I remember going to orientation the next year and thinking, they have overestimated how valuable this experience is. I'm sure you don't feel that way right now. Anyway, it was ironic. The kid who wants to go to college a year early ends up going a year late, but it gave me the gift of arriving to college fairly centered. And my napkin moments continued in college. They weren't only social, they were also academic. I remember my first physics classroom at Harvard, walking in, and there was a cluster of people. It was a reunion, and they were talking about the physics Olympics. And I remember thinking, isn't that cute? Physics Olympics, like the Olympics, except for physics. And I realized, oh, that is a real thing. I'm probably in the wrong classroom right now. And it turns out that I was. There was shopping period there as well. I was able to adjust. I took an astronomy class with about a dozen students, and I was the only woman in the class. Our professor spent a lot of time communing with the blackboard, which I understand. But he did occasionally turn around and interact with us. We had a ritual once a week when he would hand back our homework, and he would read off our names one at a time. Daniel, and he would scan the room, and Daniel would raise his hand. James, and Jonathan, and he would inevitably get to Sarah. My classmates begged me, please don't raise your hand. See what he does. Will he actually connect the one female-sounding name with the one female-looking person in the room who has consistently raised her hand to Sarah? But of course, I didn't want to make it any more uncomfortable in those moments than it already was, scanning the room. So I didn't really pause. And it's never been clear to me if he just was really a warrior of trying to not see gender, if he was helping me out, or if he really was that oblivious. I think he might have been. The problem sets in that class were actually my true napkin moments. I remember reading the problems, and they went something like this. You have designed and constructed a 250-kilogram rocket and launched it toward Mars. How long will its journey take? Hint, take into account the rotation of the Earth. I'm sure that there was more information provided, but that's about the level that I was getting. And I remember thinking to myself, I'm not just missing something, I think I'm missing everything. And I don't know if you've had that experience. It's interesting. There were rules in lots of different instances, and I didn't know them. One last example from a philosophy class where there's a very special way to write a philosophy paper. I remember making argument X 8 times in 3 different ways and getting the feedback, you haven't made argument X. In spite of really dedicated teachers and a year at Andover, I was underprepared and confused in physics throughout much of college. And there are 3 things that I want to acknowledge while we're together about napkin moments. The first thing to acknowledge is that they really can be exhausting. If you're at a place that feels like a different planet, it's going to take some energy. Anyone who's lived in a foreign country knows what this feels like. And we have international students with us here. We have non-traditional students, veterans who are returning to school. We have transfer students. We have a lot of first-generation students. Many of us are going to continue to have napkin moments over the course of this year. The second thing to point out is that they can be productive. If you find yourself comfortable to the point where you're not being challenged, make sure you seek out those opportunities to be productively uncomfortable. I'll give you an example. I am productively uncomfortable when I co-teach physics of dance with Professor Coates, and we're lined up on one side of the dance studio, and she tells us to make our way to the other side, giving us some kind of an improvisational prompt. That is terror, but productive terror for me. And I encourage you to seek out ways to be challenged if you haven't been. The last thing that I want to say is to keep in mind that when you feel the least equipped and like you least belong, those times might be the very times when you have the most to give. In spite of my hiccups with the philosophy papers, which were substantial, I considered myself a humanities person. Physics challenged me and thrilled me from the moment I learned about coordinate systems, which is kind of embarrassing to admit, but it's true. And it took me many, many years to get to a point where I was thinking like a physicist. Now it's really second nature to me, and my other talents and inclinations have come along for the ride, and it makes me a better physicist. The last thing I want to talk about, I know that it's warm, you're all doing well. There's more physics coming. The last thing I want to talk about is your questions, because I have an organizational principle to suggest for your time here. It's not going to help you choose your courses or your extracurricular activities, but it might give you a new way to pay attention and make the most of the situations you find yourself in. It's It's not a new idea. It really crystallized for me when I was reading the Chronicle of Higher Education. Do you know about productive procrastination? It's a good one to figure out. You shouldn't procrastinate. But when you do procrastinate, how much better to have accomplished something you're proud of, in addition to the guilt that you feel and the problems that you've dug yourself deeper in. So for me, I read the Chronicle of Higher Education to procrastinate. And in 2013, there was an article by James Lang that referenced a book about successful college students, written by Ken Bain. What the best college students do. I don't often put much stock in those kinds of books, but Ken Bain wrote a very insightful book about teaching and what it is to become a better teacher. So I was optimistic, and there were a lot of good ideas in there. The one that stuck with me is identify your questions and carry your questions with you everywhere. So, what are your questions? What is it that you, as an individual, wonder about? What do you worry about? They could be big questions, questions like how do we create and maintain justice in a society? Or how can I use my privilege to open doors for others? Or how do we get the plastics out of the ocean? Identify your most urgent questions and carry them with you. If you are thinking about justice, assume that your math class, your painting course, and your time playing intramural soccer all have something to contribute. It's a way for you to take responsibility and some level of direction for your education, and let you, with your unique skills, background, perspective, make connections and discoveries that otherwise wouldn't be possible. Like all advice, this is potentially dangerous. What I do not mean by this is for you to walk into your classes, ignore the syllabi, and bend the course to your own will. You're at a research university, so your faculty are theorists and practitioners who are immersed in our disciplines. We bring our own goals and discipline-specific questions to the table, and we're well-informed. Your own questions are a supplement. They aren't an excuse to stop listening. They're a motivation to listen well. The assumption with that kind of listening is that the information is relevant and you could learn something transformative. And they actually enable you to contribute in unexpected ways. What I want to do with our remaining time is walk you through just one of my questions and share some of what I've learned by this way of interacting with the world. So here's the question. Why does the universe have a speed limit? I'm fascinated by velocity. How fast are we going right now? We don't appear to be moving at all, but we're falling around the sun at between 15 to 20 miles per second. It's very peaceful, if warm. We aren't near the center of the galaxy, which is actually for the best because we think there's a massive black hole at the center of the galaxy. We're out in the spiral of the Milky Way, and it takes our solar system a few 100 million miles to complete an orbit. That means that we're moving at about 150 miles per second. Our galaxy moves throughout the local group of galaxies, and if we think even bigger, our universe appears to be in a period of accelerating expansion. In spite of all of this relative motion, we will not, it seems, find a pair of objects that are moving faster than the speed of light with respect to each other. Our universe has a speed limit. We're going to dive in one more step because I'm a particle physicist and you're Yale students. We can do this. Thinking about fundamental particles, we have a few examples without mass. Photons are particles of light. Gluons, they're involved in the strong force, quantum chromodynamics. And we've theorized gravitons, mediators of gravity. Those particles have no mass and by definition, only move at the speed of light. If you have a particle with even a little bit of mass, you can't get that particle to the speed of light, which means that velocity is intrinsically tied to mass. And the mechanism of mass, discovered in 2012, is the Higgs field, something that I'm studying right now, which ties into one of my fundamental questions. Without the Higgs field, elementary particles would be zooming around at the speed of light. So my question about the speed limit of the universe is really linked to the question of mass. In 2012, reasonably soon after the discovery of the Higgs by my collaboration and another, I was with a few hundred of my very good friends. We were still celebrating the discovery. And at the back of the auditorium, I ran into a colleague of mine who is a really talented science communicator. And I asked him, "So, how's it going, talking about the Higgs?" And he said, "It's hard. It's really difficult to explain. In a public setting, you don't pull out quantum mechanics and field theory." And I agreed. It was a challenge for us. So I looked for help. I collaborate, as you've heard, with Professor Emily Coates. There was a grant that was being offered by the New Haven Council for the Arts to support scientist teams. It was called Reintegrate, and it was trying to pull pairs of artists and scientists together. And Emily and I were looking for something to do associated with it, and I asked her, "Can we tackle the Higgs boson for this?" In the process of our work together, Emily went to one of my public lectures on the Higgs, and she asked me after, "Do you have any idea what you're doing when you're talking up there? You're making all kinds of motions. You're basically dancing the Higgs as you're up there." And I said, "No, I had no idea." And it's problematic to hear that because I'm going to be self-conscious for the rest of my life now talking about the Higgs boson. And she asked me, "Do you know if your colleagues do this?" And I said, "I have no idea." So we set off to CERN to interview some of my colleagues. And we asked them, "Describe the Higgs." And we collected their analogies. And we watched how their interactions of their bodies actually mapped to the words they were using. In this process, I thought very deeply about the ways that I was imagining the Higgs mechanism to work, as I talked about it, as I thought about it, and noticed the pieces that weren't safe, places where I'd lifted in macroscopic ideas to describe a microscopic phenomenon. And it forced me to go back and look more deeply, more carefully at the theory. It's the people who understand a concept that are really the best place to come up with a safe analogy, right? The moral of this story for me is that we shouldn't narrow ourselves prematurely when it comes to our questions. If you care about getting plastics out of the ocean, don't take only courses on plastics and courses on oceans. I learned more about mass through working with a choreographer than I ever could have imagined I would. And I know this may seem like a selfish way to approach the liberal arts. It's basically looking around with your questions and thinking, all of these things can teach me about my stuff. But I really think it's the best compliment you can pay another discipline, to say, I believe that you're relevant to what I care about, and there are insights that can be offered that are only limited by my ignorance, and I can't even imagine the connections yet. And your stuff and your questions will change in your time here. I know that you will discover questions if you're paying attention. Conversations with each other, inside and outside of the classroom. And I hope and assume that some of your questions are going to evolve through your interactions, again, with each other inside and outside of the classroom. I'm going to free us all soon because I know we need time to sleep and time to think. Just a few more words. Balance. I think it's a useful framework, but it misses something that I think is critical. I really want you all to thrive here, and that can occasionally require focus. Good luck with your napkin moments. You're actually not alone. Remember, define your questions. and carry them with you everywhere. At this point, we're not here for your accomplishments. We're here for your potential. And one last analogy. This institution is not a fancy Thanksgiving dinner, and the course catalog is not a menu. You aren't surrounded by assembled dishes here. You're surrounded by ingredients, because you don't consume an education. You have to construct it. So, turn off your phone, get some sleep, do your best, find the help when you need it, and when you can, embrace the challenges you face that train your brain in productive ways to access the world in different ways. Thank you very much for your time and attention this afternoon, and I really look forward to seeing you around campus.
So Professor Demers, thank you for that amazing, inspiring words, and I hope you all will take her advice to, as you get to know each other over the next 4 years, share your napkin moments with each other, share your questions, and help each other find balance. You're going to have a big reception in your residential colleges, followed by a formal dinner, a Thanksgiving-like dinner in the dining hall. It's really a memorable event and a great way to spend the evening before your first day of classes here. So I hope you look forward to that, and you all look really wonderful, handsome, and lovely. But before we leave today, as promised, you're going to learn one of our really most beautiful traditions. And so we have the world-renowned Yale Glee Club with us here, together with our most distinguished director, Jeff Alma, who's going to teach you bright college years. So please give him a warm welcome.
Thank you, Dean Chun. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. As Dean Chun explained, we conclude the address by inviting all of you to join in a time-honored Yale College tradition, the singing of our alma mater, Bright College Years. I have a few members of the Yale Glee Club here to help me out. They're going to sing through verse 1 once for you so you can hear what it sounds like. And after that, I will invite all of you to stand and to sing verses 1 and 2 together as they are printed on the back of the program. It's our tradition at the end of the second verse to wave our handkerchiefs in the air, so be ready for that and follow our lead. Sing out loud, sing out strong, and welcome to Yale.